Good morning. Welcome to Aurora First Christian Church. I want to share something with you guys. So while you're turning to John chapter 18, and we're going to start in verse 28, I want to share something with you guys that happened this morning, and I thought it was like really, really cool. So I was walking around the facility. You guys know what I mean by that. And I was giving a tour, as it were, to one of the gentlemen who is going to be a chaplain. And he said, "Look at that." And I said, "Look at what?" He said, "Do you see what those birds are doing?" And I don't know if you guys have ever seen birds courting. That's the word that I know. Courting each other. The elaborate things that they do. Some of them. The dances, as it were, the way that they fly, and so on and so forth. Now this was one that I had never seen before, but and you know, when he pointed it out, I mean, you know, there were some parts of it that I had seen, but the two birds, as it were, when they were facing each other, and you know, as it were, doing their little courting dances, they both flopped on their sides, facing each other, and then stood back up, and then flopped on the other side, and laid there, just looking at each other for a little while, danced around together, and we're just, and I thought to myself, that there's elaborate things that preachers do to, as it were, draw someone to them, to enter into a partnership or unity, or whatever word you want to use to describe that. And in my car on my way here, what was going on in my mind is, to what extent did God go to draw himself, or to draw us into unity with him? To what extent did we see Jesus go? It's only impacted even more by his status, by his position, by who he is. And it's made even more magnificent when you look at who we are, how far we have fallen, and how we push and have pushed him away, some of us for most of our lives. And today we're going to look at this passage. It's going to start in John chapter 18. We're going to start at about the 28th verse, and we're going to go in the 19th verse, or the 19th chapter, all the way through, halfway through the 16th verse. And that's going to be the extent of where it is that we're going to read. But it's something that I'm going to do differently today is I want you to look at, because there's so much in here, guys, and I'm not going to touch on very much of what's in here, but there's one thing that I really want you to look at is there is three major categories of people that we will see in here. And I want you to think of what category do you fall under? And does that need to change? Okay? I'll go ahead and I'll open us up in prayer, and then we will get into what those categories are, and then I want you, and I'll do that after we read, and then we'll go over it again slowly. Okay? Father, your children are in need. We need our eyes open. We need our heart open. We need to be able to see what it is that you've put in front of us. We need our perspective changed on all the things that are around us, some more than others. And if you don't do this, there won't be a change. Grant us this, to see, to perceive, and to act accordingly. Amen. Starting in chapter 19, after these Jewish leaders have, as it were, kangaroo courted Jesus, railroaded him, as it were, and ganged up on him. It says, then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was early morning, and they themselves did not enter the governor's headquarters so that they would not be defiled, but could eat the Passover. So Pilate went outside to them and said, what accusation do you bring against this man? They answered him, if this man were not doing evil, we would have not delivered him over to you. Pilate said to them, take him yourselves and judge him by your own law. The Jews said to him, it's not lawful for us to put anyone to death. This was to fulfill the word that Jesus had spoken, to show by what kind of death he was going to die. So Pilate entered his headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, are you the king of the Jews? Jesus answered, you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me? Pilate answered, am I a Jew? Your own nation and chief priests have delivered you over to me. What have you done? Jesus answered, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting, that I might not be delivered over to the Jews, but my kingdom is not of this world. Then Pilate said to him, so you are a king? Jesus answered, you say that I'm a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. Pilate said to him, what is truth? After he said this, he went back outside to the Jews and told them, I find no guilt in him. But you have a custom that I should release one man for you at the Passover. So do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews?" They cried out again, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas, in this text, says robber, but the term in the original language is insurrectionist. Then Pilate took Jesus and flogged him, and the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head and arrayed him in a purple robe. They came up to him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" and struck him with their hands. Pilate went out again and said to them, "See, I am bringing him out to you, that you may know that I find no guilt in him." So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Behold the man." When the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried out, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him." The Jews answered him, "We have a law, and according to that law, he ought to die because he has made himself the Son of God." When Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid. He entered his headquarters again and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. So Pilate said to him, "You will not speak to me? Don't you know that I have authority to release you and authority to crucify you?" Jesus answered him, "You would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given to you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me over to you has the greater sin." From then on, Pilate sought to release him, but the Jews cried out, "If you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. Everyone who makes himself a king opposes Caesar." So when Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat at a place called the Stone Pavement, and in Aramaic called Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation for the Passover. It was about the 6th hour. He said to the Jews, "Behold, your king." They cried out, "Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar." So he delivered him over to them to be crucified. I said 3 categories, and then there's a bunch more minor categories that you can see in here. And as we go over this ever so slowly, or hopefully quickly, in your mind, I want you to think what category you would maybe put these people in. And afterwards, what category do you fit in? Now here in the text, we only see the examples of 2 categories. But there is a third one that's spoken of by Jesus himself. The first category of people that we will see when we look here is those who reject him, who, because of their power and their status and that they have, or their position, as it were, in the world, that they're not willing to even recognize that this Jesus. Those who would absolutely and utterly reject him for who he is. The second category is a group of people that, or a person that we see knows. So maybe there's four categories. Who knows who he is? To whatever extent that they see him to be, right? Or that they are informed of him to be. But even in that category, you have someone here who calls him king, recognizing who he is, but that recognition has absolutely no effect on his actions. The third category of people are those who maybe just mock him, but that's just somebody who would just reject him anyways. So maybe we can just put them under the first category. And the last category, although you don't see it exampled here in front of you, you see it spoken of, and it's those who see him as the truth. Those who understand him and listen to his voice, who listen to what it is that he says. They led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was early in the morning, and they themselves did not enter the governor's headquarters so that they would not be defiled, but could eat the Passover. In Jewish custom and such, or law, however you want to look at it, they weren't able to go into the house of a Gentile. They weren't able to go into the business of a Gentile. They weren't to associate with Gentiles in any sort of living area, as it were, or working area other than, because they were separatists. And then by going into that household or that business or whatever it was, they would be ceremonially unclean for 7 days, that they weren't going to be able to eat this Passover and to celebrate this with the people. But you know what? I'm not going to step in there because what it's going to do, it's going to affect how I see myself and how others may see me. You know, it's this perception of holiness that I give out to others, and I'm not willing to lose that. And what it is that I'm going to do is I am going to rather find a workaround. I reject who he is to the point that I'm rejecting him. Rejecting something that would be given to them, this righteousness that would be applied to them, imputed to them, given to them. But they'd rather have their own form of righteousness and stand before God on their own. Those who would call themselves children of God and yet reject Jesus simply out of fear and hatred, because he challenged everything that they stood for. Everything. So they bring them to Pilate. It's not that they hadn't tried to kill him on their own before. They've constantly picked up stones to throw at him, to stone him, and he's always escaped their grasp. But I don't want to be ceremonially unclean because I want to look good for everybody else. can't celebrate the Passover with blood on my hands. So I'm going to get my little workaround going on. They bring Jesus to Pilate. And Pilate goes out and says to him, all right, what accusation are you bringing against this guy? John doesn't record it here. But in the other Gospels, they actually say that, he says he's a king. John just simply records here that they answered him, if this man wasn't doing something wrong, why would I bring him to you? Judge him yourselves. We can't kill him. It's this political thing that they had, this political position that they would be frowned upon. And during this time, this Passover feast, what you would probably need to know that in this town, in this place, they were known for a lot of uprisings. Especially during a feast of the Passover, where they would be celebrating being released from bondage, as it were, something that God had done for them back in Egypt. During this time, there had been a lot of insurrections that had happened. People who had rose up against the Roman government. And during this certain time of the year, the Romans would post more guards. It's like when there's a political event that comes to town, right? Or some event where there's some high-profile thing going on, and you see heightened security in our day and age. Same thing. Pilate didn't normally stay there, but he was brought in for this time. So on pretense, they bring him to Pilate because of the amount of extra guards that are around, and let's look good for the authority. Am I painting a better picture here for you? We can't kill him. Not that we haven't tried before, but that was something they said under their breath, I'm sure. But this was just simply to fulfill the word that Jesus had already said. This is the death that I'm going to die. It's at the hands of the Romans. Pilate entered his headquarters again and called Jesus and said to him, are you the king of the Jews? Jesus in standard form, do you say this of your own accord, or did others say it to you about me? Are you really questioning me if I'm the king? Or are you just going on the accusation of others? Am I a Jew? Are you supposed to be my king? Do I know your laws? Do I know all of your stuff? Your own nation and chief priests have delivered you over to me. What did you do? Jesus answered, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting that I might not be delivered over to the Jews. But my kingdom is not of this world. Simple statement. Pilate says to him, oh, you are a king. So you are a king. You say that I'm a king. In your head, are you envisioning this conversation? Outside, you have a mob of people. Chief priests, A crowd is gathering. It's early in the morning, right? It would have been after the Jewish council had their meeting. So early daybreak. They didn't meet during the nighttime. You couldn't condemn a man at nighttime. So the sun has already come up. It's not like they woke Pilate out of his sleep. So there's a little crowd forming outside because they're noticing that something is going on. There's as it were a tension in the air. And Jesus says to him, "You say that I'm a king. You say that I'm a king." Jesus says, "For this purpose I was born. And for this purpose I have come into the world. To bear witness to the truth. And everyone who is of truth listens to my voice." That's the purpose that I came into this world for. To bear witness to the truth. On a side note, I want you to think about what is true. Because what you say is true in your mind is something that is going to inform you, to cause you to act. Okay? Pilate here says, what is truth? It's not like he's questioning Jesus. Because there's something about him. There's something that he knows, but it's not something that he acts upon. You know, earlier when we were reading that book, what it spoke to us about was what we were created to be in the beginning. Right? In Genesis, it says that our purpose was to bear God's image, to have dominion over this place, as it were, to steward, to manage, and to oversee it as if we were God's representatives, because we were. And we had fallen from that. So how do you sometimes bear witness to the truth if you're not speaking? By how you act. And Jesus had come not only to bear witness by what he said, but what he did, to what truth really is. Truth is reality. And if your truth and your reality do not line up with what God says, you are not living in the real world. You're living in your own perception of what it is. Misinformed, but by people who were misinformed. And they were misinformed by other people that were misinformed. You see, guys, deceived people do not know that they have been deceived. They don't. And until a revelation of God, from God, comes, your perception of truth is wrong. It's wrong. And Pilate had a perception here. Right? Oh, you're a king. Oh, if you only knew. King of kings. Lord of lords. But my kingdom isn't of this world. My kingdom, if it were of this world, I'd have whooped all of y'all. But that's not the purpose for which I came. My purpose was to bear God's image, speak God's words, be the man that the first Adam was created to be, that he could not. That's why the last Adam had to come. It was for that purpose. And those who could see that purpose, and those who could hear his words and really, really listen to him, those who would be part of that kingdom. Now there's the third type of people. You don't see them, but Jesus talks about them. This is the category that we should fall under. Those who would recognize the King. Those who would submit ourselves to his authority or listen to his words. You know, in the original Jewish language, there's no word for obey. Did you know that? It's just listen. Gives a whole new meaning to when Jesus says, those who have ears to hear, let them hear. Right? It's more like listen, listen. When you look at it, when you look at the Jewish language, right? Because the more that they repeat something, it's the higher importance of it, right? Or the higher, it's like levels. You know what I mean? So it's listen, listen. That's what Jesus is basically saying. If you listen, listen. You know, not just hear, but if you listen. He says, I've come into the world to bear witness to the truth, and everyone who is of that truth. Everyone who is of that truth listens to my voice. And Pilate just simply says, what is truth? After he had said this, he went back outside to the Jews and told them, I don't find any guilt in this guy. You have a custom that I should release one man for you at the Passover. So do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews? Oh, now he is the King of the Jews, even to Pilate. And although Pilate may, in word, say that he's king, his actions don't show it. He's not listening, is he? He's not. They cried out again, not this man, but Barabbas. Barabbas was an insurrectionist, a robber. Whatever character that you want to apply here, that it's released to us somebody who is like us. Don't release to us somebody that may have authority over us. Someone who might have the right to tell us how we should be doing things. If you read in the Gospel of Matthew, in the 27th chapter, you'll find something that although John doesn't include it here, I would like to just share it with you, because it will tell you more about the character of Pontius Pilate. Pontius was his position, Pilate was his name, right? Or Pontius, if you're speaking that Latin stuff. His wife had come and spoken to him and said to him, steer clear of that righteous dude. I have had some dreams about him last night, and they were troubling. In her dream, she called him righteous. Or in her conversation, to her husband. She declared to him that in her dream he was righteous. And here he is standing right in front of Jesus, this righteous one, as it were, and having to pass judgment on someone who was in right standing. The way that these people would interpret, or the way that these people would look at how dreams are, is that dreams were in their mind a word from God, or the gods, as it were. A way that they spoke to them. So it was very, very meaningful. Your wife runs in the door, or your husband runs in the door and goes, hold on, man. I had a vision. You listen. Pilate's in a very, very rock and a hard place position here, because the people who rule the people are outside saying, this guy's wrong, and we want him done away with. And maybe he knows about these people. Maybe he knows the way they do things. Maybe he knows the influence they have with the crowds, as it were. And he sees his position threatened. He's been placed there over a people that rise up constantly. Constantly. And even more around this time of year. And if you're under Caesar and you're in that position where you have to control these people, keep them slightly subdued, how does that look before Caesar if you can't do your job? Caesars have been known to kill people on the spot. Being a Roman leader was not a good thing. Not when you have to deal directly with Caesar. All it does is add fuel to the fire and adds more fear into the heart of Pilate. Now, Pilate looks like us sometimes, right? When we have an understanding, as it were, of who this Jesus is, but we're afraid of those around us and how they might feel to or towards us by what we do. Now here's Pilate. He's between a rock and a hard place. Although he sees Jesus or proclaims him as king, the outside and everything else around him obviously matters more. How people see him. So his own status, as it were, kind of like the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Pilate took Jesus and flogged him, and the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head and arrayed him in a purple robe. They came up to him saying, "Hail, King of the Jews," and struck him with their hands. There are those that we have influence in their lives, and our actions speak much louder than our words, but our words sometimes, when the actions are not backed up by them, it's just a weapon. I grew up in a neighborhood where people would call each other names, and then that name would stick, right? I see my brother's watching at this time, so I'm gonna use his nickname. We were playing baseball one day, right? And somebody hit a fly ball, and I don't remember what position he was playing, but he backed up to try to catch the ball, and he lost it in the sun. And I don't know if you guys know just how bright that sun can be when you look at it. And if there's a ball right there in the sun, I don't know if you guys know just how difficult that is to catch. But somehow he lost it in the sun, and instead of catching it with his glove, it just missed his glove, and it hit him in the head. And he laid on the ground, and one of the people that were around there used to be an old police show called 240 Robert, right? And my brother's name is Robert. So the ball hits my brother in the head, and he's on the ground. Of course, nobody tries to show him any compassion, right? Because we were jerks growing up. But one of my friends stuck his hand up to make the cop noise and goes, "Oh, 240 Robert needs assistance in center field." And that name stuck with him for a very, very long time. And it's mocking. It's exactly what it is. It's a mockery. It's taking something that somebody says and rolling with it, using it against this person. So they mock, put him in a robe which is purple, the color of royalty, and fastened a crown of thorns, and they put it on his head. And then what they didn't understand is that they were clothing the king as a king. They presented the king to his own people who rejected him. The only one that honored him as king was his father. And they bring out Jesus and they put the crown of thorn on his head and they say, "Hail, King of the Jews," if they only knew. Struck him with their hands, and Pilate went out again and said to them, "See, I am bringing him out to you, that you may know that I find no guilt in him." What the guards did only made it worse, because here he comes out in a purple robe, signifying royalty, a crown on his head, even though it's thorns. So much imagery here that we can't go into right now. And Pilate simply says, "Behold the man." His words are something that is trying to calm down the crowd. Because he didn't say, "Behold your king." But here was what man was supposed to look like. The image of God. And more. The Son of God. Deity wrapped in flesh. If Pilate only knew what it was that he'd done. When the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried out, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him." The Jews answered him and said, "We have a law, and according to that law, he ought to die because he has made himself the Son of God." I don't think if you guys, you guys probably remember. Culturally, if you were the son of something, what did that make you? Son of a carpenter, right? Pilate understood this. All it does is add to Pilate's guilt. Now he's standing in the presence of the one who is the King of Kings, who is the Lord of Lords, who is God, whose wife warned him about how he should treat this man. And all he becomes is fearful. But that fear doesn't show his action, does it? That listening, it only shows his self-preservation. When he heard the statement, he was even more afraid. He entered his headquarters and again said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" Probably only the honest question that he's asked so far. Jesus doesn't answer it. Because Jesus has a plan. He's got a mission and he's got a purpose. Pilate said to him, "Will you not speak to me? Do you not know that I have authority to release you and authority to crucify you?" No, Jesus answers, "You would have no authority over me at all unless it had been given to you from above." Oh yeah, I am who they say I am. That's exactly who I am. For that reason, he says, those who delivered me over to you has the greater sin. From then on, Pilate sought to release him, but the Jews cried out, "If you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. Everyone who makes himself a king opposes Caesar." What did that make Barabbas? The leader of an insurrectionists, right? Someone who tried to overthrow the current government. Yet that's who they wanted. Their own words are condemning him. Their own rejection of him condemns him. And Pilate is just seeking to release him. to, as it were, just get away from the situation. Not that he submits. Not that he listens. But they egged him on. Everyone who makes himself a king opposes Caesar. So when Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat at a place called the Stone Pavement, in an Aramaic, Gabbatha. Now, it was the day of preparation. Preparation of the Passover. It was about the 6th hour. So this had been going on for about 3 hours. I could only imagine that the crowd outside had grown. Jesus has been flogged, beaten, crown stuck on his head. All they can do is reject him. And he's silent for most of the time. You know, that talks about a trust that he has in his Father, doesn't it? Obedience, as it were, to a purpose that he understood. Obedient to the Father because he subjected himself unto him. He knew what it was that this action would bring about. He knew that this would be the redemption of those that the Father had given to him. He knew that this was going to be the what it would take, as it were, to show his children how much he loved them, to be the sin bearer as well as the image bearer. And he knew that. He said to the Jews, "Behold your king!" Exclamation point. He knew who he was. And they cried out, "Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him!" Again, Pilate, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priest answered, "We have no king but Caesar." God himself is not our king. We are ruled by the world and its systems. I fall under that. Oh, I'm no son of my father. I'm no image bearer of my father. I am no child of God. I have no king but Caesar. And how true was that statement? So he delivered him over to them to be crucified. It's not really hard to be able to pick out these categories of people. It's not hard. What's hard is to see what category we fit into. And if we don't see ourselves fitting in the right category, well, what does it take? Here in what we read before them and before us now, although you can't see him, we are in the presence of the King of Kings. Always. Always. Are we those who would be part of this kingdom? That would submit to that authority, that would listen to his voice. And not just listen, but listen. Right? Listen with an effect that causes action in the correct direction. Something that aligns with reality. Something that aligns with what truth truly is. I'm sure I'm not sitting in a room full of people that just utterly rejects him. If you did, you wouldn't be here. So that means that those of us under this roof fall into one of those two categories. And in the parts of our life that we don't fall into the correct category, that is where we need change. But don't worry. He who works in you is faithful and just to complete that good work until the day of Christ Jesus. So you won't be doing it alone. And when you're in the fellowship of those in this building, then you're also in good company. We'll help. Listen first, and then act. Amen? We're here every Sunday at about 10:30-ish. Please come and join us at 1601 Dayton Street, right here in lovely Aurora, Colorado. If you cannot join us here in person, then please join us here. If you do not have a fellowship, go get one. May God bless you. May He keep you. May He watch over you and He guide you. May he cause his face to shine on you, and may that keep you in perfect peace until we meet again. Amen? Amen. God bless you. Go in peace.